In this video, we're continuing the standard descriptive characteristics series. There are 8 standard descriptive characteristics for each motion, and in this video, we will be covering the characteristic known as debatable, which tells us whether the motion we looked up can be debated. Now, you'd think that when you look up the debatability of a motion, you'd find one of two options. Either it is debatable or it is not debatable. While generally that is the case, we're going to review some of the other options that you will find under standard descriptive characteristic number 5. For example, when we look up the motion to appeal, we find something very interesting. But before we review the language there, let's make sure we're clear on how an appeal works. Whenever the chair makes a ruling, a member has the right to appeal. For example, let's say the chair rules that a member is still eligible to be elected to office even if his dues are not paid in full. Any member can immediately appeal from this ruling by saying, "I appeal from the decision of the chair." And if the appeal receives a second, the question is taken out of the chair's hands and placed before the assembly for final decision. The assembly cannot change its rules through an appeal, but it can determine the true meaning of its rules through an appeal, which it does by vote, a majority being required to overturn the ruling of the chair. So, is this debatable? Can members debate the matter before it is put to a vote? Well, when we open Robert's Rules of Order newly revised 12th edition and flip to the section on appeal, which is section 24, we see the standard descriptive characteristics heading right there in paragraph 3. If we scroll down to entry number 5, which is always the entry that deals with debatability, we see that it says, "No member is allowed to speak more than once except the presiding officer, who need not leave the chair while so speaking, but should stand." This supersedes the general rule that the chair does not speak in debate, and standard descriptive characteristic number 5 goes on to say, the first time the chair speaks in debate on the appeal, he is entitled to preference over other members seeking recognition. He can answer arguments against the decision or give additional reasons by speaking a second time at the close of the debate. So we see that in the case of an appeal, the chair gets to speak twice while everyone else is limited to one speech. We also see that the chair gets to speak first and last. These rules highlight the importance of checking the standard descriptive characteristic for a motion to fully understand the rules that govern it. Now, as you can imagine, most motions do not deviate from the general rules the way that an appeal does. When it comes to debatability, most motions fall into the simple categories of debatable or not debatable. But some motions fall into a third category of sometimes debatable. Let's take a look at an example. If we look up the motion to amend, which is section 12 of Robert's Rules of Order, we flip one page to find the standard descriptive characteristics heading, and we scroll down to entry number 5 to see that it says, "is debatable whenever the motion to which it is applied is debatable." It goes on to explain that amend is undebatable whenever the motion to be amended is undebatable. For example, when a main motion is pending, it is debatable, so any amendment to that main motion is also debatable. And standard descriptive characteristic number 5 provides, such debate must be confined to the desirability of the amendment, however, and must not extend to the merits of the motion to be amended, except as may be necessary to determine whether the amendment is advisable. On the other hand, let's say the privileged motion to recess is pending, which is not debatable. An amendment to the length of the recess would be in order, but such an amendment would not be debatable, since the privileged motion to recess is not debatable. So we see that the motion amend cannot accurately be categorized as either debatable or not debatable, because its debatability is determined by the debatability of the motion it proposes to amend. For another example of this sometimes debatable category, let's take a look at the motion called reconsider. Under standard descriptive characteristic number 5 for the motion reconsider, we see that it says, "is debatable whenever the motion proposed to be reconsidered would be debatable." So if the vote on a main motion were being reconsidered, the motion to reconsider would be debatable. And standard descriptive characteristic number 5 goes on to say, "and when debatable, opens to debate the merits of the question whose reconsideration is proposed." So unlike the motion to amend, during debate on the motion reconsider, the debate can also go into the merits of the motion that it proposes to reconsider. For one final example of a sometimes debatable motion, let's return to the motion to appeal, which, under standard descriptive characteristic number 5, provides the following. Is debatable unless it A. relates to indecorum or a transgression of the rules of speaking, B. relates to the priority of business, or C. is made when an undebatable question is immediately pending or involved in the appeal. So we see that there are specific situations where it is not debatable, but apart from those circumstances, it is debatable. Another quick way to find information on a motion's debatability is to use the tinted pages located in the back of Robert's Rules of Order. Here we simply need to look up the motion by name on this alphabetical list of motions. Remember that the main motion is at the very top of this table, and everything else is in alphabetical order below it. So let's turn to the D's and search for the motion division of a question, which is a motion that proposes to divide the pending question into one or more parts to be considered individually. Once we've found our motion, the headings across the top will explain the information contained in the columns for each motion. Looking in the debatable column, we see that the motion division of a question is not debatable. It's never a bad idea to look up a motion that you expect to come up in a meeting, or one that is currently pending in a meeting, to verify those standard descriptive characteristics. And if you're the presiding officer in a meeting, a quick glance at the table of rules relating to motions in the tinted pages at the back of Robert's Rules of Order can give you immediate access to the information you need to properly process almost any motion. That covers standard descriptive characteristic 5, which tells us whether a motion is debatable.